I remember that I was lied to about who was behind 9/11.
What controls the world? It's money. It's a matter of controlling the resources of the world. They don't want peace. They don't want democracy. War makes money. Get back to Smedley Butler. War is a racket.
I mean, of course it was a conspiracy. 2 or more people plotting anywhere to do something illegal is a conspiracy.
On the 14th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, family members of the victims, President Barack Obama, and U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter delivered speeches commemorating those who died at Ground Zero in New York City, the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where the Flight 93 National Memorial officially opened up to the public.
And after 14 years and forevermore, terrorists who threaten us will learn this simple yet unbending truth. No matter how long it takes, no matter where they may hide, they will not escape the long arm of justice.
Another set of family members and politicians throughout the nation marked the anniversary with calls to do more than remember the events of 9/11. They're calling on the public to investigate the details of what happened that day and question the official U.S. government narrative.
When you remember 9/11, don't just remember, I don't remember that 9/11 happened and I couldn't find my sister for almost 14 hours or she almost died. I don't just remember that. I remember that I was lied to about who was behind 9/11.
The government version of events claims that Osama bin Laden directed 19 hijackers to fly 4 planes into high-profile locations across the United States, including the 2 planes that hit the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, 1 that hit the Pentagon, and 1 that was reportedly headed to Washington, which ultimately crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. The planes that hit the Twin Towers created a fireball of explosions, which weakened the internal steel columns within the buildings, causing 3 of the towers to fall at nearly free-fall speed, including 1 which was not hit by a plane. The public is told that the attacks stem from the jihadist disdain for American freedoms. But not all of the public accepts this official story. This includes family members of the 9/11 victims. Bob Mcllvaine is one of these family members. Mcllvaine has been independently investigating the 9/11 attacks since his son's death and calling attention to what he says are discrepancies in the government's narrative of the events of that day.
14th anniversary, you've been involved with this movement for some amount of years now, trying to get justice for your son. What feels different to you this year compared to past years?
To be honest, nothing. I've been doing this so long, and I really don't have any faith in this country, and I don't have faith that this will ever come to fruition because they just can't afford to. The world politics won't allow it because it'll just, we are an empire, and an empire is not going to allow this to bring them down.
Mcllvaine and other survivors, family members, activists, architects, engineers, firefighters, and researchers are part of what is sometimes known as the 9/11 Truth movement. These skeptics include groups like the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, Firefighters for 9/11 Truth and Unity, Pilots for 9/11 Truth, Scholars for 9/11 Truth and Justice, and a long list of local activist groups and individuals from around the globe. There is no official position within this loose-knit movement. Instead, it's a mix of opinions, theories, and ideas which sometimes conflict with one another. Despite the wide-ranging theories, members of this movement generally agree that the official bin Laden narrative promoted by the U.S. government is full of holes. On Saturday the 12th, New York City activists partnered with Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth to co-host a symposium called Declassify the Truth, 9/11 Transparency on the Rise.
We can be held indefinitely. We can be tortured. We can be assassinated merely for being associated with terrorism. Guess how terrorism is defined? It's not.
In 2010, an online Washington Post article that should have broken the internet revealed that the CIA made fake videos of Osama bin Laden videos. The CIA says these videos, while neither confirming or denying their existence, they say that those videos are a matter of national security.
The Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth focus on the collapse of the Twin Towers as well as the collapse of World Trade Center 7, the 47-story tall building that fell later in the day despite not being hit by a plane. Indeed, much of the 9/11 Truth community sees the collapse of Building 7 as the smoking gun which reveals the presence of explosives used to bring the buildings down. According to NIST, the building collapsed due to fires that spread throughout it. The 9/11 Truth community, however, disputes the claims that fires were raging through the building, pointing to dark, black smoke which signals oxygen-starved fires.
Building 7, obviously, that's a demolition. An idiot can see that. My dog can see that. My grandchildren can see that. I will continue talking about that my son was murdered. It's an inside job, just for the fact that he died. I could say he died before the planes. That's a strong possibility. when people say, how could that possibly happen? Because there were goddamn bombs in there. That's how it happened.
The symposium also sought to evaluate legislation in Congress that seeks to declassify 28 pages of 9/11 evidence. The 28 pages in question are part of the joint inquiry into intelligence community activities before and after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, which was redacted by former President George W. Bush shortly after the 838-page report was released in 2002. Former and current government officials who have seen the documents have stated that the information relates to financing of the terrorists and points a finger at members of the Saudi government and possibly Saudi royalty. On the 14th anniversary, Congressman Thomas Massie called on the public to challenge the official story. Writing on Facebook, Massie said, quote, "As a congressman, I had access to the documents, and while reading them, I had to stop every few pages to rearrange my understanding of history for the past 14 years and the years leading up to the attack. It challenges you to rethink everything." Massie went on to challenge his colleagues to, quote, "read the pages on behalf of their constituents and co-sponsor a resolution which would force the declassification of the 28 pages." Despite promises from President Obama, he has remained silent on the 28 pages since taking office.
My name is Terry Strada. I am the national co-chair of the 9/11 Families and Survivors United for Justice Against Terrorism. I stand here today united with members of the U.S. Congress and my fellow 9/11 family members and survivors, seeking truth, accountability, and justice for all those that we lost and love. By hiding the truth about who financed 9/11, the guilty parties have gone unpunished, free to continue financing terrorist organizations, and as a consequence, we have witnessed the creation of branches of Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, grow at an alarming rate. It has long been reported the subjects of the redacted 28 pages point the finger at Saudi Arabia, who have given billions of dollars to promote Wahhabi Islam, the very ideology that spawned those terrorist organizations and defined their jihadist agendas.
Were the Saudis involved in facilitating 9/11? And if so, what should we do about it? Right now, we can't have that discussion because the only people who have access to the information are the people in a very narrow band of the administration and the intelligence community. And they're not going to call for any significant changes without strong motivation from the American people to do so.
Much like the redacted 28 pages, Freedom of Information Act requests related to a number of different aspects of the 9/11 attacks have also yielded redacted and censored results. One of the people leading this fight is Vance Green, whose sister Diane was working in the World Trade Center on 9/11. Green's goal is to continue compiling documents and putting together pieces of a puzzle that he hopes will reveal more about what exactly happened on September 11, 2001.
I got involved with the truth movement and the declassification efforts after finding out in 2005 that everything that I believed for 4 years about the official explanation, Osama bin Laden and 19 hijackers and big bad evil boogeymen who read the Constitution wanted to kill all of us, was not true. Because I actually defended that story rigorously. I argued with my significant other about nuking Afghanistan because I wanted revenge. So I felt manipulated once I came into contact with some 9/11 Truth Movement documentaries and books. This is not a 9/11 family member who's quote-unquote drinking the Kool-Aid of the Truth Movement. I've spent the last almost 6 years now doing my own independent research, fact-checking and fact-finding mission, verifying every little tidbit of every claim the quote-unquote truther community has been saying. And instead of just sitting down and talking to members of the truth community and taking their word, I've been trying to get both sides and then going to our government and asking them, for submitting FOIA requests, basically to get them to speak to the claims or evidence from the 9/11 truth community. So when I have both sides of the story from our government and the truth community, I now have a full picture and the evidence doesn't match. One person, there's incongruity somewhere, and the people, or the story that's not consistent is unfortunately our government, especially when the stories came out about hijackers being alive. So that posed a big problem for me. That was the one major thing that piqued my interest, because if a guy who was supposedly on a plane and died on 9/11, he's not supposed to be walking into an embassy in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia saying, "Why are you showing my picture on television?" Now, of course, I didn't know that on September 11th. I didn't know it on September 12th. I didn't know it until 4 years later.
While Green focuses on FOIA requests, the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth have presented a body of evidence which they say proves the presence of nanothermite, a military-grade incendiary capable of assisting in a controlled demolition in the dust of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Centers. In presentation after presentation, Richard Gage, a member of the American Institute of Architects and founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, has attempted to bring the attention of his colleagues, the media, and the public to discrepancies between what the National Institutes of Standard and Technology claims was the cause of the collapse of the building and what can be observed by studying video of the collapsing structures.
FEMA documents a 1,200-foot diameter debris field around each tower. Videos show multi-ton steel sections of hundreds of individual steel pieces ejecting out of the towers at 60 miles an hour for a distance of 600 feet. They also show clouds of debris pulverized in mid-air and isolated explosive ejections as many as 60 stories below the so-called crush zone. Videos also show the near total destruction of both towers. What does all this tell us about the forces and energies involved in the destruction?
Gage and over 2,300 architects and engineers have signed a petition stating that the government's scientific explanations do not add up and that the buildings could not have fallen at the speed they did without the uniform removal of the support structures from the lower half of the building.
Just a couple months back, there was an attempt to get the American Institute of Architects to vote on a resolution for investigating Building 7. Was that the specific resolution? It failed, though. Could you tell us about that experience, how it went? What was the reception?
Let's call it a success, and I'll qualify that by the following. We have 55 AIA members of the American Institute of Architects, who co-sponsored this resolution. So for the first time in history, of our 5-year history of lobbying the AIA, we now have a resolution on the floor, and there were 400 of the top AIA, their management mostly, including their board, who then, after our case was made, came out and said, they actually lied. They said, that we looked at this already, and they didn't seriously at all provide any firm conclusion. We've looked at this and the building came down by normal office fires, which is the official story of this 47-story skyscraper's collapse in 7 seconds down to the ground, symmetrically, after witnesses hear explosions.
On Friday, September 11th, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth partnered with the recently revived Firefighters for 9/11 Truth and Unity for the debut of a documentary presentation called Firefighters, Architects, Engineers, Expose the Myths of 9/11. Firefighters for 9/11 Truth and Unity is made up of former and current firefighters from fire departments around the nation who question the official version of events. In the new documentary, the former firefighter gives a presentation on how he used the National Fire Protection Association's own guidebook to prove that the National Institute of Standards and Technology's investigation was incomplete.
Learning that what I had been told wasn't true was shocking enough, not being able to talk to people and not having a healthy way to deal with it. So I felt like I couldn't go anywhere. And I started giving up on myself and realized, what's the point? I felt like there was so much apathy around me that I stopped trying. When I was in 9/11 Truth only, I was blaming people. I identified who I thought were the people responsible, and it wasn't until I made the shift and I went, this isn't a people problem, this is a systems problem. It's our systems that are bringing out the worst in us. So and there's all kinds of science to back this up, if we're in a system that we're supported, our basic needs are met, and we have love and compassion, we don't do the things that we see in the world today.
Also speaking at the 14th anniversary symposium and publicly for the first time was Henry Pavlak, a survivor of the North Tower. Pavlak recently published One Way Elevator, a novel exploring his experience in the North Tower and what led him to question the government's official 9/11 story. In his book, Pavlak's character finds a book that claims 9/11 was an inside job, which leads him to explore the 9/11 Truth movement. Pavlak describes feelings of guilt for surviving the terror attacks, and he says that the guilt initially prevented him from questioning the official story of 9/11.
I want to find out exactly what really happened, not only for myself, but for all those people who died, all the people who we heard today that there were, as of last year, there were 3,700 people with cancer who were first responders from 9/11 saying that the air was safe to breathe. I mean, look at the wars that it's spurred and how many people died in the wars and how many people are continuing to die. There were 22 suicides on average a day. And those numbers, I don't think they're counted in the official death toll. Before I started writing it, I was saying people might say you're just trying to make money off 9/11, and then I thought about who is making money off 9/11. I said it's the defense industry, it's the private contractors. They're the ones who are making the money.
It really is important to look at history. You know, what controls the world? It's money. You know, we don't talk about the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. These people control the world, okay? So, like, blaming it on Bush or blaming it on Cheney, that's silly. Blaming it on Israel is silly. You know, everyone's a patsy in this. You know what I mean? It's a matter of controlling the resources of the world. They don't want peace. They don't want democracy. War makes money. You go back to Smedley Butler. You know, war is a racket.
I mean, of course it was a conspiracy. 2 or more people in the room, or 2 or more people plotting anywhere to do something illegal, this is a conspiracy. Yeah. So our government has a conspiracy theory. Yeah. Their conspiracy theory is it was 19 people, of which we've shown the photographs to you, although 6 of them are alive somewhere. That's their conspiracy theory. I encourage everyone to file FOIA requests. Never take anyone's word for anything. Don't take my word for it. Please be skeptical. And if you ever see me anywhere, demand that I prove anything that you heard me say. I'm more than willing to do it to you. I'll flood your mailbox with every piece of information that I have. And then you can go ahead and file your own request and make sure the documents that I give you are not doctored or altered in any way. That would be awesome. But I encourage everybody to file their own FOIA request.
For the organizers of this year's event and the family members and activists who continue to question 9/11, they hope that by presenting evidence that counters the government's claims, they can create a change in the American consciousness, leading to the release of the 28 pages and a call for a new and independent investigation. As the media and politicians are quick to remind us to never forget 9/11, we must also remember to never forget to question the government's official version of events. Let us never forget those who died on this day 14 years ago, and let us not allow the financiers of this crime to go unpunished.
House Resolution 14. Go to 28pages.org. It is in the paper. You're not paying attention, sir.
There's should have them printed.
Obama won't pass the law.
They're in the paper.
There's support for Democrats and there's support from Republicans to declassify the 28 pages. The people who have seen the pages say that the 28 pages point to Saudi Arabian government involvement.
It was brutal, you know, and she went to my wife and said, "How can your husband think this way?" But it's just too painful. They just don't want to believe it. It's again saying your father's a rapist. You know, you just don't want to believe that your country could possibly do something like that.
I went into kind of a downward spiral and stepped away from the truth movement. And I've been for the last 5 years on what I'd call a spiritual transformation. And then it inspired me to step back in. I was invited back in this year, and I would only come back in if I could bring in the unity element. And where do we go from here?
Firefighters, architects, engineers expose 9/11 myths, where Erik, lawyer, and I, Erik of Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, now 200 firefighters calling for a new investigation. We team up.
But that was the beginning, I guess, of cracking that shell around my head that I kept me insulated from this inconvenient truth about what people call conspiracy theories.
He's in a bookstore one day just browsing, and he sees a book saying 9/11 was an inside job. He buys it, and that's where he gets into the conspiracy theory world.